The morning light was soft, but it did little to warm the girl as she walked along the street with slow steps. Her clothes were worn from too many days outside, and her shoes made a faint scraping sound on the pavement. She held an old trumpet close to her chest, wrapped in a thin cloth that had frayed edges. It was the only thing she guarded like a treasure, even though most people who saw it didn't think much of it. But for her, it meant hope. It was the only thing she felt she was truly good at. Her stomach had been empty since the day before, and the hunger sat inside her like a weight. Still, she kept moving, trying not to think about it too much. She walked past shops, small cafes, and busy people who rushed by with coffee cups and warm clothes. Most didn't even glance her way. Those who did offered a quick, polite smile before looking away. She paused in front of a small restaurant that smelled of warm bread and fresh soup. The scent drifted out each time the door opened, and it made her take a slow, deep breath. She didn't come there randomly. She had stood across the street for the past 3 days, watching the place and wondering if she should go in. Every time she walked away without trying. But today she couldn't. Her hunger pushed her forward. She tightened her grip on the trumpet, took a long breath and stepped inside. The warm air hit her skin like a gentle blanket, and for a moment she just stood there, letting the feelings sink in. A few people were seated at tables talking softly. Some glanced up at her, their eyes curious but not unkind. Others didn't look at all. The owner was behind the counter, wiping a tray and arranging cups. He looked busy and focused, the kind of person who didn't like being interrupted. She hesitated for a second, but then walked toward him. When he finally noticed her, he raised his eyebrows slightly. "Can I help you?" he asked, not rude, but not warm either. Just direct. She swallowed and nodded. I wanted to ask something," she said softly. He waited, not saying a word. She glanced around the room, then back at him. Her voice was almost a whisper when she spoke again. "Can I play my trumpet here? For a meal? Just one meal?" For a second, the owner simply looked at her, as if he wasn't sure he heard correctly. Then a small laugh slipped out, the kind someone gives when they think the question is strange. "You want to play for a meal?" he said, trying to understand if she was serious. She nodded again, her fingers tightening around the cloth-wrapped trumpet. He glanced at the instrument and shook his head slightly. "That thing looks older than I am," he said with a smile that wasn't exactly mean, but wasn't kind either. "I don't think it can play anything good anymore." His words stung, but she didn't show it. She had heard similar comments many times. She looked down at the trumpet, brushing her thumb over the cloth. "It works," she said quietly. "I can play well. I promise." Some customers had started paying attention. A couple seated near the window exchanged a quick look. A young boy at another table whispered something to his mother, who smiled faintly. The owner let out another short breath, not quite a laugh this time, more like disbelief. "Listen, kid," he said, leaning an elbow on the counter. "People don't usually pay for music around here. They come to eat, chat, and relax. I don't think this is the place for it." She felt her voice tighten inside her chest, but she pushed through it. "I only need one meal," she said. "Just today." Something in her tone made the owner pause. The confidence wasn't loud or bold, but it was steady, almost stubborn. He looked at her more closely. Her thin arms, her tired eyes, the way she held the trumpet like it was the only thing keeping her standing. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right," he said finally. "If you really want to try, you can. But only for a minute." He pointed toward the door. "You can play outside. If people actually stop and listen, maybe I'll give you something." It wasn't a warm offer, but it wasn't a rejection either. It was enough. "Thank you," she said, and her voice carried a small spark of relief. As she stepped outside, the customers inside watched her with mixed expressions. Some seemed curious, some doubtful, and others quietly hopeful. She walked to a clear spot on the sidewalk just a few steps from the entrance. Cars rolled by, people walked in both directions, and the usual city noise filled the air. She unwrapped the trumpet carefully, revealing the slightly dented brass and worn mouthpiece. It was old, yes, but it was well loved. She lifted it to her lips, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and took a slow breath. The air was cold, but she focused on the sound she wanted to create. Inside the restaurant, the owner leaned near the doorway, arms crossed. He still didn't expect much. In his mind, she would probably give a shaky note or two, and that would be it. He wasn't being cruel, just honest based on what he saw. The girl opened her eyes, looked down for a second, and then lifted her gaze to the sidewalk as if imagining an audience that wasn't there yet. She steadied her breath again. Then she played the first note. It wasn't perfect. Her lips were cold, and nerves made the sound tremble just a little. But she didn't stop. The second note was stronger, clearer, filled with something deep and honest. And then the third note carried a tone that made two people passing by turn their heads. Within moments, the melody wrapped around the street. It was full, not loud or showy, but full of emotion, like someone telling a story without words. The sound rose above the traffic noise, drifting into the restaurant where the customers fell quiet. The owner, who had leaned back with his arms crossed, uncrossed them slowly as he listened. People walking by slowed down. Some even stopped, drawn in by the surprising beauty of the music. A few steps from her, a woman carrying shopping bags stood still, watching with wide eyes. A man taking a morning jog slowed until he came to a complete stop. The girl kept playing, her eyes half closed, her body still but full of life. The music didn't sound like it came from an old trumpet. It didn't sound like it came from someone tired and hungry. It sounded like it came from someone who had held on to one small piece of hope for years and poured it all out in one breath. Inside the restaurant, one customer whispered, "Wow! She's actually amazing." Another nodded, leaning forward to see better. The owner didn't say anything, but his face slowly shifted. First surprised, then thoughtful, then something close to regret for not believing her earlier. She played until her 1 minute was nearly up. When the last note faded, there was a brief moment of stillness on the street. Then someone clapped, then another, and then a few more. She lowered the trumpet and let out a shaky breath. The crowd that had quietly gathered around her began to give small smiles, murmurs of praise, or gentle nods. She hadn't just asked for a meal anymore. She had shown them a piece of who she was. Someone talented, someone strong, someone who refused to give up even when life made things difficult. And the owner, now standing fully in the doorway, looked at her with a completely different expression than the one he had earlier. After her first notes floated into the morning air, the girl lowered her trumpet and let out a quiet breath, feeling a small spark of hope flicker inside her. She had done it. She had played, even when she wasn't sure she could, and somehow the sound had carried, enough for people to stop and notice. But the hardest part was still ahead. What would the restaurant owner do now? Inside, the owner stayed near the doorway, his eyes fixed on her. His expression had changed, but not completely. There was still a trace of skepticism, a lingering thought that maybe this was a trick, that maybe it wouldn't last. But the richness of the sound had tugged at something he hadn't expected. It was real. She could play, and not just a little, she could move people. A few of the customers in the restaurant were already talking quietly among themselves. "Did you hear that?" a man said, leaning closer to his friend. "That kid. That was incredible. She's homeless, right?" The friend replied, frowning as he looked toward the door. "How can someone like that play like that?" The owner cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. He wasn't used to being caught off guard. He didn't like admitting he had underestimated someone, especially a child, but he had to face it now. He stepped outside slowly, keeping a careful distance. "All right," he said, trying to sound calm and neutral, though his voice held a trace of something else. Curiosity, maybe even admiration. "You got 1 minute and you did play. Not bad. But I can't just give you a meal because of a few notes." The girl looked up at him, her eyes steady. She didn't argue, didn't beg. She just held the trumpet by her side and waited. "Listen," he continued. "People don't usually pay attention to music here. They come for breakfast, lunch, or coffee. Music isn't what this place is about." He paused and rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward the small crowd that had gathered outside. You got people to stop and look, yeah, but I need to know if this is really worth it. Can you do more than just one song? She nodded slowly, feeling a flicker of excitement. I can play more, she said softly, almost shyly. I can play as long as you want. The owner raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting that answer. As long as I want? You don't understand. People come here to eat. If you keep playing, they might get distracted or worse, get annoyed. She tilted her head, thinking carefully. I'll keep it quiet. I can play softly. People will still hear it, but it won't disturb anyone. He hesitated, staring at her. There was a sincerity in her tone, a quiet strength that made him stop and reconsider. He had been quick to judge her, and he knew it. But now he felt a strange pull to see just how good she could be. Fine, he said finally, though his voice was still cautious. Play. Play for 5 minutes. If it's good, maybe I'll give you something to eat. If it's bad, then we're done. Her eyes lit up just a little. She nodded, thanked him quietly, and raised the trumpet back to her lips. The first note came softly, almost like a whisper, but it carried a feeling that made people stop walking. The second note was richer, and then the third note flowed like a small river, gentle but full of depth. The owner watched from the doorway, arms crossed, trying to stay composed. But it was impossible not to notice how the few notes were changing the atmosphere. People outside had stopped in their tracks, some leaning on railings or standing still on the sidewalk. Their expressions ranged from surprise to wonder. Some even pulled out their phones to record the moment, but no one spoke. The sound was enough to hold their attention. A woman standing nearby in a light coat whispered to her child, "Listen, she's amazing." The boy stared wide-eyed, gripping his mother's hand. Even the jogger who had paused earlier stayed, now tapping his foot lightly to the rhythm she was creating. The girl's fingers moved over the trumpet valves with care, her lips pressing against the mouthpiece with precision. She was no longer playing just to get a meal. She was playing to show who she was, what she had inside, and the hunger in her stomach faded into the background as her music filled the morning air. Each note carried a story of hardship, of nights spent on cold streets, of hope that had never completely gone away. Inside, the owner felt a shift inside him. He hadn't expected to feel anything like this. He was a practical man, careful with his judgments, used to running a business that depended on order and predictability. Yet here was a girl who had nothing, playing with everything she had, and it demanded attention. It demanded recognition. Okay, he muttered to himself. Okay, that's actually good. The minutes passed slowly but felt like an eternity of sound. People outside clapped quietly, some even held their hands to their hearts. A few strangers approached, placing small bills on the ground near her feet. They didn't know her story, but the honesty of her music had reached them. Finally, the girl stopped playing. She lowered the trumpet, letting the last note fade into the soft morning air. She was breathing a little harder now, but there was a glow on her face. She had given everything she could in those 5 minutes. The owner stepped closer, now fully outside, and studied her. His eyes softened, and for the first time, he saw her not as a street child, not as a nuisance, but as a young person with real talent and determination. You actually have skill, he admitted, his voice quieter now, almost reluctant. I didn't think that first note would sound like that. She smiled faintly, still holding the trumpet. Thank you, she said simply. He nodded, his mind racing. He wasn't just impressed by her playing. He was realizing how wrong he had been to dismiss her at first. He looked at the small bills on the ground and the people watching outside. He knew now that she had earned their respect, whether they realized it or not. All right, he said slowly. Come inside. I'll give you a meal. Not because of your trumpet alone, but because, well, you've earned it. She blinked, a mix of relief and disbelief crossing her face. She had expected skepticism, maybe even rejection. But she had not expected kindness, not really. And now here it was, in the form of a hot meal waiting for her inside. As she walked through the door, She could feel the warmth of the restaurant wrap around her. It was more than just the temperature. It was the sense of safety, of being seen, of being recognized. She carried the trumpet carefully, her fingers brushing the worn brass, and for the first time that morning, she felt a small sense of peace. The owner led her to a small table near the back, where he placed a plate of steaming food. She looked at it, her eyes widening just slightly. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, and the sight of it made her stomach twist with anticipation. "You can eat while you're here," he said, his voice gentler than before. "And if you want, you can play here sometimes. Just be careful, all right? Don't distract people too much." She nodded, her lips curling into a small smile. "I understand," she said softly. As she began to eat, she thought about the morning, about the laughter that had greeted her request, and about the music that had changed everything. She realized that this meal was more than just food. It was a sign that someone had seen her talent. Someone had believed in her enough to give her a chance. Outside, a few customers lingered near the sidewalk, quietly talking among themselves about the girl who could play like that. Some even considered coming back just to hear her again. The small crowd that had gathered slowly dispersed, but the memory of her music lingered in the air, a reminder of what can happen when someone dares to take a chance. The owner watched her from behind the counter as she finished her meal, thinking about what had just happened. He felt a strange mix of pride and humility. He had laughed at her, doubted her, but now he had seen the truth. He had learned that talent and courage can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the smallest gestures, like giving someone a chance, can change everything. After finishing her meal, the girl felt warmth spreading through her body, not just from the food, but from a sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. The restaurant buzzed quietly with the low murmur of people talking and clinking cutlery, but it didn't feel overwhelming. She looked around, noticing the simple comfort of the space. The wooden tables, the soft light, the smell of fresh bread and coffee. For a moment, she imagined what it would be like if she could stay somewhere like this every day. The owner watched her from a distance, still unsure how to approach the situation. He had been hardened by years of running the restaurant, always cautious about people who might take advantage. But there was something different about her. He saw not just talent, but a determination that reminded him of times in his own life when he had fought to be noticed, to be heard. After a few moments, he walked over to her table. "If you want," he said, trying to sound casual, "you can play a little inside, just a few songs while people eat. Keep it soft. People like that sort of background music sometimes." He hesitated, then added, "I don't usually do this, but I think you might deserve the chance." Her eyes widened, and she looked down at her trumpet with a mix of surprise and gratitude. She had not expected this, and for a second words failed her. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you. I promise I won't disturb anyone." She moved to a small corner near the window where sunlight fell in a warm strip across the floor. Carefully, she unpacked the trumpet and lifted it to her lips. The first note was soft, barely more than a whisper, but it carried the emotion of someone who had lived through hardship and yet refused to be broken. She closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her, not worrying about anyone else, letting the sound speak for her. The customers inside stopped talking for a moment, turning to listen. Some leaned back in their chairs, relaxing into the melody, while others smiled quietly, surprised at the beauty that came from such a young girl with a battered instrument. Even the regulars, who had seen everything, paused to take in the sound. It wasn't just a melody. It was a story being told without words. Her fingers moved with precision, each note carrying a piece of her journey. Nights spent outside in cold streets, days without a proper meal, moments of loneliness, and the flicker of hope that had kept her going. The music didn't just fill the room. It filled something inside the hearts of those who listened, drawing them into her world. The owner leaned against a counter, arms crossed, watching closely. He had expected a simple performance, maybe a few pleasant notes, but this was different. There was passion in every sound, honesty in every pause. He felt a lump form in his throat, realizing he had misjudged her completely. A young couple at a nearby table exchanged a glance. "She's incredible," the woman whispered. "And to think she asked for just a meal." The man nodded. "Yeah, she's amazing." The girl continued to play, moving naturally between soft, flowing notes and brighter, cheerful tones that lifted the mood of the room. The customers, who had started with curiosity, were now fully engaged, swaying slightly to the rhythm without realizing it. A small child clapped softly at the end of a short phrase, and the girl smiled faintly, letting the music continue uninterrupted. As she played, the owner approached her again, cautiously. "You know," he said softly, "I think you might have a real gift, not just for me or for people in the restaurant, but for anyone who hears you. Do you perform anywhere else?" She shook her head slowly. "No," she said quietly. "I've never had a chance like this before." He nodded, understanding more than she could see. "Well," he said, a small smile forming, "maybe this is the start of one. You have something special. Don't waste it." The girl's hands moved over the trumpet as she played, and for the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Not just noticed, not just tolerated, but truly seen. Every note she played was a part of herself, and the room listened. After a while, she paused to breathe, lowering the trumpet slightly. A few people clapped softly, some whispered words of praise, and a man near the window handed her a small note and some coins. It was simple, but it mattered. Every small gesture reminded her that people could be kind, that her music could reach hearts. The owner stood quietly behind her, letting her receive the small gestures without interrupting. He watched her take in the gratitude, and he realized that talent like hers didn't just entertain. It inspired. He hadn't realized how much a single performance could change the mood of a place, or even the outlook of the people who lived inside it for just a few minutes. A young waiter came by and nodded politely. "You're really good," he said. "I've never heard anything like that in here before." She nodded politely, her eyes still bright with focus. She didn't need to say much. The trumpet spoke for her. She returned to her music, moving through a series of soft and lively pieces, letting the sound fill the restaurant completely. The morning passed in a gentle rhythm. People came and went, some stopping to listen for a moment, some staying to finish their meals while her music played. The girl felt time moving differently here, in this space of warmth and attention, where her music was appreciated and her presence mattered. By the time she set the trumpet down again, she felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had played for over an hour, and though her lips were sore and her arms tired, she felt stronger. The owner approached her once more, holding a small notebook. "I've been thinking," he said. "If you want, you can come here sometimes to play. Not every day, but regularly. People will appreciate it, and you can earn some money for yourself." She blinked, surprised, and then nodded slowly. I would like that," she said, her voice soft but steady. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that hadn't been there earlier. "Good. We'll work out the details later. For now, just know that you've made an impression today. Not just on me, but on everyone who heard you." She picked up her trumpet, cradling it with care, and nodded quietly. She felt proud, not in a loud way, but quietly, deep inside. Her music had made a difference, even if only for a moment. But she knew that moment mattered. It mattered to her, to the people who listened, and even to the owner who had underestimated her from the start. As she left the restaurant to take a short break, the owner called out to her. "Hey," he said, "don't forget. Keep playing and keep believing. You're good. Really good." She turned and gave a small smile, then walked to the corner of the street, lifting the trumpet to her lips once more. The notes floated out, soft and beautiful, carrying a story of hope, resilience, and talent that could not be ignored. Passers-by paused again, and she felt a small thrill in her chest, realizing that every note she played could change someone's day, just as it had changed hers. The girl continued to play outside the restaurant, letting her music flow freely across the street. People walking by stopped in their tracks, their faces softening as the notes wrapped around them. Some leaned against lampposts, others simply stood still, lost in the melody. Even the sound of cars seemed to quiet down as if the world itself was listening. She played without thinking, allowing each note to carry her feelings, loneliness, hope, and the small sparks of joy that she had found in the midst of her struggle. Her fingers moved carefully on the trumpet, and every once in a while, she closed her eyes, imagining herself on a stage where people could hear the story behind each note. It wasn't about the applause. It was about being heard. The owner watched from the doorway, his arms crossed, his usual stern expression softened by surprise and admiration. He had never expected such raw talent, especially from someone who had come to him asking for a meal. He looked around at the small crowd forming on the sidewalk. A few people had pulled out their phones, recording the performance. Others had dropped coins into a small cup she had placed on the ground. It wasn't much, but to her it meant everything. A woman holding a shopping bag whispered to the man beside her, "Can you believe it? She's only a child. And yet, it's like she's telling a story without words." He nodded, captivated, unable to tear his eyes away from her. Even the jogger from earlier stopped, leaning on the edge of the sidewalk, taking in each note with a look of awe. The girl's music rose and fell in waves, soft and strong, lively and gentle. People started moving closer, drawn not by curiosity but by the emotion carried in the sound. A small child, eyes wide, clutched his mother's hand and tapped his tiny foot to the rhythm. She smiled faintly at him, not breaking her concentration. Inside, the restaurant's regular customers leaned out of their windows or doors to listen. Conversations slowed as her music filled the space. A few people even clapped softly at the end of a phrase, their applause mingling with the gentle hum of the street. The owner finally stepped outside, standing closer than before, taking in the scene. He felt something shift inside him, an acknowledgement of how wrong he had been to laugh at her. Not just wrong, he felt guilty. He had underestimated not only her talent but her courage. Asking to play for a meal was not just a bold move. It was an act of bravery in a world that often ignored people like her. As the performance continued, he saw the reactions of people around him. Strangers who had nothing to do with her life were stopping to appreciate it, smiling at her, dropping a few coins, whispering words of encouragement. Each reaction was a small reminder that what she did mattered. And for the first time, he realized that a single act of giving someone a chance could ripple outward in ways he couldn't have imagined. A young man leaned on a railing, recording the girl on his phone. He whispered to his friend, "This is incredible. She should be famous or at least known for this." Her music continued, carrying into the morning, into the rhythm of the city, and into the hearts of those who paused to listen. The notes were honest and full of feeling. Every tremble, every rise and fall in the melody told a story. People felt it, even if they didn't know the details of her life. Some paused their own worries for a moment, taken away by the purity of sound. The girl finished a particularly gentle phrase and let it linger in the air. The silence that followed was not empty but filled with anticipation, as if the listeners were holding their breath. Then, slowly, the applause began. A few people clapped at first, unsure of themselves, then more joined in, until the street was filled with quiet but heartfelt applause. The girl lowered her trumpet, a soft smile forming on her face. She had done it again. She had not just played for a meal. She had touched hearts. And for a moment, the hunger in her stomach felt smaller, replaced by something more substantial. A feeling of being seen, being valued, being capable of more than she had allowed herself to believe. The owner approached her cautiously. I underestimated you," he said quietly, not wanting to draw too much attention from the crowd, but his words carried honesty. "I laughed at your request earlier, and I'm sorry. You're good, really good." She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. There was no resentment in her gaze, only quiet acceptance and a little hope. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, then gestured to the small group of people around them. "See? People believe in what you're doing. You deserve to be recognized for it." A few people approached her now, handing her small notes or coins, offering words of praise. Each gesture made her heart feel a little lighter. Even though she was still struggling, even though her life outside the restaurant remained difficult, she felt a connection that day, a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. A passerby, holding a cup of coffee, dropped some bills into her cup, saying softly, "Don't stop. You're amazing. Keep playing." She smiled faintly and nodded, her fingers brushing the trumpet's valves as if to thank him silently. Every small act of kindness reinforced the message that she mattered, that her talent mattered, and that her courage to ask for a meal had been the right choice. The owner watched all of this in quiet reflection. He realized that sometimes people's value could not be measured by their appearances, their circumstances, or even their words. He had learned a lesson in humility and humanity, one that he wouldn't forget. A small act of doubt, a quick laugh, and then a moment of recognition had transformed the morning into something unforgettable. The girl continued to play for a while longer, each note carrying warmth and honesty. She wasn't aware of time anymore. She was lost in the music, in the joy of creating something beautiful, something that could touch others even if she had nothing else to give. The city moved around her, cars passing slowly, pedestrians pausing, and the sounds of everyday life blending with her melody. Eventually, she set the trumpet down, letting the last note drift into the air. The applause came again, soft but steady, and she felt a quiet satisfaction that went beyond hunger or recognition. She had shared a part of herself and it had been heard. That moment, small as it seemed, was a turning point. It was proof that even in the most difficult circumstances, her voice mattered. The owner walked up to her once more. "Come inside," he said, his voice warmer now. "I want to make sure you eat, and we can talk about you playing here again if you'd like." She nodded, gathering the trumpet carefully. Her smile was soft but genuine, filled with a sense of relief and hope. She had been given a chance, a real chance, and she would make the most of it. The world had noticed her talent, even if just for a morning, and that recognition carried weight far beyond a simple meal. As she stepped inside the restaurant, the warmth of the room welcomed her. The smell of food, the hum of quiet conversation, and the sense of safety wrapped around her like a soft blanket. For a few moments, she forgot about the cold streets, the empty nights, and the struggles she faced. Here, in this small space, she had found a place where her music was valued and her presence mattered. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly alive. After finishing her meal, the girl felt a sense of comfort she hadn't experienced in a long time. Her stomach was full, and for a moment, she forgot the cold streets and the nights spent without a proper place to sleep. She clutched her trumpet carefully, feeling its familiar weight, and thought about how far she had come in just a morning. She had walked into the restaurant hungry and nervous, and now she was leaving with not just food, but a feeling of acceptance and recognition. The owner, who had been observing her from a distance, approached her with a thoughtful expression. He had spent the morning watching her music touch the hearts of strangers and move people in ways he hadn't imagined possible. There was something about her determination and the honesty in her playing that reminded him of why he had started the restaurant, to create a space where people felt welcomed, even when the world outside could be harsh. "You did well today," he said, his voice quieter than before but carrying sincerity. "I know it's not easy to put yourself out there, especially when you have so little. You showed courage. And not just that, you showed talent that can't be ignored." She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his with a faint smile. "Thank you," she said softly. "I just wanted to be heard, to have someone listen." The owner nodded. "And you were. More than you know. People noticed even outside the restaurant. Some even recorded you. You've made an impression that morning will not forget." She felt a small warmth in her chest, the kind that comes from feeling truly seen. She had spent so long invisible, ignored by most people, that the attention, though gentle, was overwhelming. Yet it was not about fame or praise. It was about acknowledgement, about being recognized for her effort and her skill. She started, hesitating for a moment. "I've never had anyone really notice me like that before." The owner's expression softened. "Well, maybe it's time someone did. And maybe it's time you start believing in yourself, too. You have a gift, and the world deserves to hear it. A few of the restaurant customers came by to offer quiet smiles and nods of encouragement, some whispering words like, "You're amazing," or "Keep playing, don't stop." The girl felt the support around her, small but meaningful. Each word and gesture added a layer of hope she hadn't carried in a long time. The owner handed her a small notebook. "I want you to write down your ideas, the songs you want to play, or even just thoughts. If you ever come to play here regularly, this might help. And who knows, it could help you in the future as well." She took it carefully, her fingers brushing over the cover. She nodded silently, grateful, and tucked it under her arm. The thought of having a space to organize her music and ideas felt empowering. It was not much, but it was a start. "You can come here whenever you want to play," he continued. "Not all the time, but regularly. You'll have people who appreciate your music, and you can even earn some money safely. I'll make sure of it." She blinked, her lips parting slightly in disbelief. "Really? You mean that?" He smiled, nodding. "Yes, I saw what you can do. Talent like yours shouldn't go unnoticed, and hunger alone shouldn't decide whether someone can play music. You'll have a chance here." Her heart swelled. She had never imagined someone would offer her such an opportunity. The thought of not just playing for a meal, but playing for people who truly valued her talent, was almost overwhelming. Yet, she felt a determination rise inside her. This was her moment, and she intended to make the most of it. She packed her trumpet carefully, feeling protective of it as always, and stepped out of the restaurant. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the streets slightly, and the city seemed a little less harsh. People who had passed by earlier smiled as they recognized her, some nodding in acknowledgement. She returned the gestures with a quiet smile, feeling a connection to the world that she hadn't felt in a long time. The owner called after her, "Don't forget, keep playing. You have something special, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She nodded, her eyes glistening slightly. "I won't," she promised. She walked a few steps away from the restaurant and paused, taking a deep breath. The streets were busy, but she didn't feel invisible anymore. She had a voice and people had listened. The trumpet in her hands was more than just an instrument. It was a bridge, a way to reach others, a way to survive and thrive in a world that had often overlooked her. As she played a few quiet notes for herself, letting the sound drift into the city, she felt a sense of freedom and possibility. Her music had power, not just to feed her, but to touch lives. Each note was a small victory, each melody a reminder of her resilience. The street corner that had once been just another cold place now held a spark of hope and recognition. A few pedestrians stopped to listen briefly, some dropping coins, some simply nodding their heads in appreciation. The girl smiled softly, acknowledging their gestures, feeling the warmth of human kindness that she had rarely experienced. Her performance was no longer about survival alone. It was about sharing a part of herself and being accepted for it. The owner watched from the doorway, satisfied with the morning's events. He had learned a lesson about judgment and opportunity, about giving someone a chance even when circumstances seemed unlikely. The girl had reminded him that courage and talent could come from the most unexpected places, and that a small act of kindness could change someone's life profoundly. As the day progressed, the girl returned to the restaurant periodically, each time greeted with warmth and encouragement. She played for small groups of customers, softly, carefully, making sure to respect the space while letting her talent shine. Word of her music began to spread quietly, as people shared their experiences and recordings with friends, and the small restaurant gained a reputation for something special. A young girl whose music could touch hearts. Even as she returned to the streets when necessary, she carried with her a sense of purpose and hope. The music was no longer just an escape. It was a bridge to a better future, a reminder of her strength and resilience. Each day brought new opportunities, new people to touch with her gift, and a renewed belief in her own worth. By the end of the week, she had settled into a rhythm, balancing survival with opportunity, hunger with hope, and solitude with connection. The trumpet, once a simple instrument, had become a symbol of her perseverance. And the owner, who had laughed at her initial request, now respected her profoundly, understanding that sometimes the smallest gestures of faith could lead to remarkable outcomes. One evening, as the city lights began to glow, she sat on a bench with her trumpet beside her, thinking about the journey she had taken in just a few days. She had faced doubt, hunger, and fear, but she had also found recognition, kindness, and a sense of belonging. Her music had opened doors she never imagined possible, and she knew that with determination, patience, and courage, she could continue to create a better life for herself. She lifted the trumpet once more and played softly, letting the notes drift into the evening air, knowing that somewhere, someone might pause to listen, smile, and be touched. And in that moment, she felt complete. A young girl with a gift, a voice, and the courage to play for more than just a meal, but for a future full of possibilities.